Welcome back, Sam Pollard, Ben Hedin, Dava Whisenant, and Dave Dennis.
Hey, Dick, are you out there? Where's Dick Waterman?
Dick Waterman's here? Oh, man.
Dave Dennis, very integral to the film. And before we get into the questions, that really all the crew people who were who contributed to the film, please stand up. You know, very important. Henry, Stu, Caroline, Sheila. Who else? Christine? Who? Christopher? Everybody, really, you know, filmmaking is a collaborative process, and it wouldn't be fair not to make sure we talked about everyone who was involved in shaping this film.
We'll start the ball rolling with the simple question, where did the film begin for you?
Well, about 3.5 years ago, this gentleman, Ben Hedin, approached me about wanting to do a film about the search for these two iconic blues musicians, Son House and Skip James. But then he threw what I call a hiccup in the mix. He said he wanted to do a film that also looked at what happened in '64 with the Civil Rights Movement. And my first reaction was, Ben, that's a lot to chew on. I'm not sure we can make that work. But Ben was determined. So his determination made me determined. And then we brought in Dava as a co-producer and the editor, and we started the ball rolling. And I want to say this about Ben Hedin. This is a first-time producer, and I've worked with a lot of first-time producers, but this gentleman was able to, with a lot of tenacity, raise the money to make this film happen. Really, tremendous, tremendous tenacity. And the first interview we did was out in California with Lucinda Williams. We took her out for a lot of drinks the night before. And then the next day, it took about 2 hours before she sat down to shoot, but she did a great job. And that started the ball rolling. Then it was to New Orleans and to Austin, Texas, and Chicago, and all the other locations. It's been you know, I've worked on a lot of films, but the collaboration between these two and all the other people involved has been, it's just wonderful for me, a wonderful experience.
And did you see that you had your doubts at first about pulling together both strands, and did you see it coming together as you were doing the interviews, or did that just happen in the cutting room?
Well, you know, as I say to my students at New York University, when you get in the editing room, that's sort of the final script. And when we got in the editing room, then it was the real challenge, you know, to make these pieces come. And Dava is a phenomenal editor. I'm an editor, so I can appreciate great editing. Dava did a great job in challenging Ben and me every time we went to the editing room to figure out how to get this story to come together, you know. So it was really in that editing process.
Dave, when was the first time you saw the film?
The first time I saw the film was, you talking about me?
Yes. Yes.
Get it confused, you'd say David.
Sorry. Yeah.
That's okay. I didn't see, I think the first time I saw the film was in Durham, I think it was the film festival.
Yeah.
There is, but I had spent a lot of time with Ben and discussing about the film, the making of the film is in the interview.
Mm-hmm.
And my getting to know him was actually, I ran from him for a few months. He was going to chase me down in Petersburg, and it was really my wife who was responsible for it. She kept saying, you're going to have to sit down and talk to this guy at one time. And so after talking to him, and this is what, you know, first is the interest around the movement, and then the work that we were doing in Petersburg, Virginia. But then the idea around this thing of talking about connecting music to the civil rights movement, especially blues. And I grew up, see, I was born on the plantation, and I was raised on the plantation. So I remember, you know, when we didn't have electric lights and things else until I was 9 years old, but how the old men would come in the evenings, and especially on weekends, and in our backyard, and they had a tub and a wire, and a comb and a piece of paper around that is, and an old rub board, and you had a band, you know, and they would play music, and actually what you hear is the pain, you know, you hear Sunhouse and Skip singing there is, you can also feel the joy, but also the pain of what they live and what life was like, you know, during those times is. And so that was all resonated with us. And so during the civil rights movement, music carried us. I mean, and the stories that would be told by the local farmers and people that we work with came to us primarily in the beginning through the music. They were easy to communicate to us through the music rather than just talking to us about it. So there are a lot of stories in that piece.
I want to say one thing. We have in the audience Andrew Goodman's brother, David Goodman. Can David take us, you know?
Now, Ben, Sam said that you lured him, when you first spoke to him, you said it was about the search for Skip James and Son House, but then you added the civil rights piece. Is that the way you remember it?
It's the way that he remembers it.
Okay.
For me, the two stories were inseparable from the beginning.
Yeah.
But the fact that it wasn't obvious to everyone else was, really a help, because it created the burden that we all, the three of us, had to fulfill in the editing room. That hey, we gotta make sure that these connect, and that it's not just June 21st, '64, but there's something larger at stake and to be said about the coming together.
So as an editor, how are you keeping the two trains on the track? That's a big job.
Yeah, I mean, Ben and I worked really closely on the story structure from the very beginning. It was kind of, how are we going to make all this work? We had all the cards and the whole thing, and we kind of knew that, June 21st is where everything had to build to, so you kind of back time it from there. And I think really the other thing is that the music, the lyrics of the songs helped us tell the story a lot, and so when we would get kind of stuck, we would.
Did your mic?
Oh, we did.
Okay.
When we would, when we get stuck, we would turn to the lyrics of the songs to help us tell the story.
Yep. Your microphone's not working.
Oh, what didn't you hear of that?
I don't think that was working either.
Oh my gosh. Should I just talk louder? Okay.
When you hit it.
Where do I start there?
Where's the song?
Yeah, so we started with June 21st was the real, we knew everything had to come together then, so we kind of back-timed everything from there. And then when we got stuck, we would use the lyrics of the songs to help tell the story, like with Gary Clark Jr., his train song, and so that was what I went to when I was stuck as far as storytelling.
Questions?
Any questions? It's always questions.
Yep. Right there. Yeah, you.
Hi. Is this on? Hi. I thought the project was really beautiful. I just want to tell all of you that it was amazing. I'm from Austin, Texas, and so I sort of grew up with the Senator Williams and Gary Clark Jr. and I don't even know how many times I've seen them live. And so seeing this sort of ode to Southern music is incredible. A question for anyone, in your experiences researching these old Southern musicians and then spending time with sort of new Southern musicians, is there this really huge correlation and inspiration and these new musicians sort of trying to continue on the work that older musicians were doing?
Can everybody hear me in this? Is this mic on?
Up in the booth, I'm just wondering if there's some problem with the mics. Give it a try.
Okay. Is this good? Okay. No, the blues, the country blues, the Delta blues that's featured in this movie, it seems in some ways an archaic art form. it's almost a century old, but it has a way of nudging forward and coming back to the table with every generation. So to answer your question,
Go more into the,
You-
talk more into the mic.
you get a performer like Gary Clark Jr., who can remember very vividly as a teenager at Austin High School being taken aside on the basketball court and being told, hey man, black people don't play the blues. You know, something that he confided to us in his interview. You have somebody like that going home after school and studying the old 78s of Skip James. So that was, you know, it was Sam's idea to have performance in the movie because it would help illustrate that continuity and that abiding influence and vitality of the blues, because just when you think it's dead, here it comes again. You know, it'll be the Black Keys, the White Stripes, or whoever else we can envision 3 or 4 years from now. But it's always there.
Yeah.
So, hey Sam,
Who's that?
it's Tom Wagner.
Hey, Tom.
Storytelling,
You got a mic there.
this storytelling, recreation footage, when you're trying to tell stories in the past, millions of documentaries have those in it. I don't think I've ever seen it so well done as in your animation. So how did that come about? That was just amazingly effective.
Well, in the discussion about how to do it, David mentioned that she had really liked the animation in some film called Searching for Sugar Man. And so we searched out those animators, Sweden. We searched out those animators, Tom, who live in Sweden, and we basically, Ben was able to get them to come on board to do the animation. And they did most of it, except for the last minute or so, right? And when we would give them the ideas and tell them the storyline and send them stuff, they would send us back schematics. It would be a back and forth. And you know, you're right. The usual thing would be to say we're going to go down to Mississippi, we're going to get somebody to drive the car, be on the road. But we wanted to do something different. And I thought, this is the first time I've really been involved with animation, so I thought it was a really good idea, and I really think it turned out well. It really turned out well.
Great. Have you screened the movie in Mississippi?
Not yet.
Any plans?
Someone will ask us, we'll definitely screen it.
Before the election? Every vote counts. Yeah, right there. Yeah. There's a microphone coming.
My name is David Goodman, and I appreciate what you've done. First, I'd like to say to everybody here that while I don't know the movie producers and directors, I know Dave Dennis, who was my brother's supervisor and was supposed to be in the car with him. Dave Dennis is a national treasure. There are people, not that many, like Bob Moses and Dave, who have searched to redeem the soul of America. And this movie coming out today in the middle of the most extraordinary presidential election maybe in the history of this country has the roots in this movie and in this time, and that while things have changed, nothing has changed, and it's up to people like us to see a movie like this and be inspired to figure out how we can move this country in a way that it was supposed to move. And I want to express my appreciation to artists, you all, who have done such an important job in bringing that message in this exquisite way. Thank you so much.
Hello. So watching this, I became really obsessed with also finding these two characters that they were trying to find in the film, and I want to know if there were any. Did you run into any problems trying to locate the pieces to put this thing together in your research, trying to find, just as we follow our three characters, trying to find these two important musicians, these artists. Did you run into any problems trying to put this together? Because I almost wanted to see a second camera watching you guys make the documentary itself.
You know, Ben is a real blues aficionado. I love the blues. Dave loves the blues. And Ben had really done a tremendous amount of research. And you know, the other element that's important in these documentaries is the archival work that we needed to do to tell both sides of the story, but not only about what was going on in Mississippi, was also what was happening during Freedom Summer in '64. So we had Caroline and Sheila and Christine involved in that process too, you know. So, you know, it takes a lot of folks to make these things come to life. And you just have to be diligent, and you know you have to do a really deep dive to find all the elements to put the story together. And you have to be patient and tenacious to make these documentaries, you know.
Hello? I just want to follow up with Mr. Goodman's tribute around you, Mr. Dennis. And I can still hear you saying in that church, I'm tired of memorials. So I'm interested in hearing how you feel today, given the number of memorials that are still taking place.
Well, that's an interesting question. I don't feel good about it, but it also tells us a little bit about what David just talked about, is in terms of how this country has sort of lurched backwards over the years. We were in this situation, this election, which is so sad. I mean, whoever becomes president under these circumstances, the country loses. We, the people, are losing. And so unless we begin to do something about this, to make those kind of the changes necessary in this country, I mean, we're going to lose more. I mean, can you imagine that the President of the United States of America is supposed to be the leader of the world? That's what we say. That's been passé. Can you imagine what other countries are looking at now and saying is, you mean to tell me one of these people are going to be my leader? You know? So we don't have more deaths unless we do something about bringing about the change and lurch this country forward again. There's one important piece in this movie that I think that most people miss. And that was the piece in there in terms of looking for Skip and Son. Is the issue around the fact is about people getting to not look at this culture, not playing the music anymore, not listening to the music anymore, not singing the songs anymore. What happened to the blues during that particular period of time? And lost that culture. Because in that picture is, as I remember, is that what losing that culture is talking about losing the important part of a people. And this has been going on in this country is in terms of the fact is where we have this whole issue around Black Lives Matter becomes so important. Why is it that those cultures in this country that was so important, was the foundation and the pillars for a lot of people and that growth in their being is being lost. So if you take that and move it in terms of where we are now, it becomes a very huge issue. And I think is that we need to begin to look at this. I think this documentary touches on a lot of important things. And that's why the symbolic representation of the two trains running becomes so important. So I want to thank Ben and others for
being able to put this together, but how do we get this message that this documentary has to the country? We're not going to be able to do it between our election time. But it's important is that it's this country that we take a step back to think and begin to figure out is this where do we want to be, and what is it we want to have to do to be able to move forward and make the changes necessary. So thank you for the comments.
Yeah,
Is there any kind of distribution that's going to occur around the country?
distribution.
Eventually, I hope. We are opening for a week at Metrograph, a great theater on Ludlow on Friday, December 2nd.
The film's going to open downtown at the Metrograph Theater on Friday, December 2nd. Yeah, for a week and maybe for an extended run. And do you have any dates out in California?
Not yet.
Yeah.
In progress.
Yeah.
Tell all your friends to come to the Metrograph. All your friends.